Before we get very far into our next story, we do have a warning for you tonight. What you're about to see and hear may not be suitable for children. Tonight, take a walk in their world.
Transpicuous news, connecting the dots between the lines.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Transpicuous News. It is March 8th, 2015. I'm still deciding how the new show is going to go tonight. I was just saying to Biggie, I have some stuff that I kind of want to talk about, but I'm not so sure if we're going to get into it tonight. So we'll see how the mood strikes me in the moment. Just because I want to make sure I have all the guys' attention, right? Make sure we have everyone aware. Here's our first article we're going to talk about. This will be about the weirdest thing you see today. Yes, apparently last year, the Danish government promoted an initiative called Do It for Denmark. I'm sorry, I have a hard time keeping a straight face on this one. Encouraging Danes to travel abroad and have sex while on holidays. They even have a pretty racy YouTube video featuring a scantily clad gorgeous blonde waiting to do her duty for the country and procreate. Singapore as well has a catchy jingle about going out and making babies, brought to you by the same guys who did the Mentos commercial. The Swedish government actually spent taxpayer money on its new genitals song, so it can start indoctrinating children early on in how they can make babies. And here in Japan, this is from a Japanese website, which has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, the government is desperate to find solutions to what it calls a libido crisis. Now this is really, really funny. Easily the most ridiculous solution they came up with was to impose a handsome tax. The idea being that if you tax the handsome man, then the less attractive men would have more money and hence be able to attract women. The guy goes on saying that he actually thought this came out of The Onion. When I remember the article, and I refused to even put it on Transpicuous News because I couldn't believe that it was actually real news. And it was. This is what the Japanese government's big idea was, to tax the handsome people. The handsome men, handsome men. Because that's not sexist. Now you get into the meat of this news story. The thing that many of these countries have in common, Japan, Denmark, etc., is a rapidly declining birth rate. In Denmark, they seem to think that people aren't going on vacation enough, and in Japan, they think the problem is with sexual desire. Of course, they're all missing the point of basically it's called cost of living. The article goes on to say you used to be able to support a family on a single income, you used to be able to afford for medical care and higher education. Well, that's all out the window nowadays. So maybe instead of trying to sell sex as an option and procreation, maybe these governments could look at options like making it so that people can afford to have babies. I don't know, it's just an idea, crazy as though it may seem. This was a massively huge article. I published this out everywhere. I mean, I literally plastered this all over the internet. Mainstream media, CNBC, press release, public health officials know that recently vaccinated individuals spread disease. Physicians and public health officials know that recently vaccinated individuals can spread disease and that contact with the immunocompromised can be especially dangerous. The article goes on to say, the public health community is blaming unvaccinated children for the outbreak of measles at Disneyland, but the illness could just as easily have occurred due to contact with recently vaccinated individual. Get this, CNBC published this. Evidence indicates that recently vaccinated individuals should be quarantined to protect the public. Needless to say, this article, the anti-vaccine movement, it just gobbled this up. goes into a lot of really, really good information, basically saying that both unvaccinated and vaccinated individuals are at risk from exposure to those who have been recently vaccinated. That these diseases you've been vaccinated for can stay in the back of their throat when they do swabs for up to months. And I talked about one gentleman who actually won this lawsuit. He won $22.5 million after he got polio from changing his daughter's diaper, and she had just been vaccinated for polio. So that was a nice little, it was like a little breath of fresh air. It was like, oh, just a little bit of truth out of the mainstream media. I like it. And just when I thought Canadians couldn't get any wackier, cuckoo for cocoa snuff. Commercial drive shop brings chocolate snorting to Canada. I saw this article and was like, what the? Snorting or sniffing chocolate is the brainchild of chocolatier, the chocolate line in Bruges, Belgium. The company website claims that because the nose is vital for tasting food, sniffing cocoa powder will help enhance the pleasure of the chocolate experience. Members of the Rolling Stones were among the first to get satisfaction from the invention at a birthday party for Charlie Watts and Ron Wood 5 years ago. Apparently, you can snort it and then you have a lovely flavor of chocolate without all the calories. Of course, they go on to talk about the fact that this is really, there's no actual studies to talk about the health effects of snorting cocoa up your nose. So before anyone runs out to their pantry, I don't know. I think I'll just stick with eating chocolate bars. I am a chocoholic. I really should introduce myself. Hi, my name is Danny. I am a chocoholic. I don't think I want to snort it up my nose, though. No, not only that, think of the first time you sneeze afterwards. Like, talk about scary crap coming into the Kleenex. Of course, maybe it's just that they were hoping if they get Canadians addicted to snorting chocolate, all that dopamine would actually make them happier, so they'd be able to take articles like this with a little bit less rage. Outrage boils over BC government plans to sell groundwater for $2.25 per million liters. So yeah, people in BC are freaking out. Apparently 82,000 have already signed a petition against the government's plan to sell BC's groundwater. Now, you gotta love the spin they put on this, right? Here's the spin. The spin the government's putting on is, well, under the Old Water Act, Nestle, like other groundwater users, didn't need to pay for the government for any of the water withdrawals, because that's something to be proud of. But now they're going to start charging them commercial rates for the groundwater. Yes, so the highest industrial rate at the new price structure means Nestle will pay the government, hold on to your hats, are you ready for this? $596.25 a year for 265 million liters of water. Okay, let's just do some math, right? This will be like the homework challenge. So if Nestle sells 265 million liters of water, let's make it a nice easy round number, and we'll say they're selling them for $1 a bottle. So they're going to make $265 million and pay $596 for the water they put in the bottles. Does anyone else have problems with this math? I think I understand why the BC residents are a little pissed. And then they add to this, and they're going to start charging annual fees as well. So Nestle will be forced to pay the new annual fee that could range between $1,000 and $10,000. Ooh, $10,000 to make $265 million. And everyone wonders why I hate Nestle. And I can't understand why. So Canadians, take note of this. This is a really, really important article, and this is a test. Canadian faces $20,000 fine and jail time for refusing to unlock his phone during airport security check in Halifax, Canada. 38-year-old Canadian citizen is facing up to a year in jail and a fine of up to 25,000 Canadian dollars for refusing to unlock his cell phone, thus obstructing an in-depth security screening by the border service officials at Halifax Airport. Okay? The Canadian Border Services Agency says the Customs Act allows border officials to examine all goods in conveyances, including electronic devices such as cell phones and laptops. So basically, under the Customs Act, the customs officer are allowed to inspect the things that you have that you are bringing into the country. The term used in the act is goods, but that certainly extends to your cell phone and to your tablet and to your computer and pretty much anything you have. This is a question that has not been litigated on in Canada. Whether they can actually demand you to hand over your password to allow them to unlock the device. Oh, my friends, this is going to get ugly, really ugly. So we're going to need to keep watch on this one. Canadians out there, watch for this coming up. This is a test. They're trying to set precedent now. And if they set precedent, the changes. Kind of like this precedent. This is nasty, like seriously nasty. Virtual biometric frontier awaits travelers to the European Union. The EU Commission says setting up a virtual frontier for all visiting non-EU nationals will help create a more welcoming Europe. Yeah, by welcoming, what they mean is when you come in, they're going to need your fingerprints and full facial captures of you. Now, I don't know why they need my fingerprint, unless they're cross-referencing to find out if I've committed a crime, in which case, gee, don't you have to have a reason to suspect that I've committed a crime? And as for full facial captures, I have one. It's in my passport. And when you pull it up on the computer screen, I'm sure it comes up on the computer screen too. So what's the full facial capture for? Well, this is supposed to go into effect on the 23rd, on March. Oh, I don't think I've got it in this part of the article. In March, but they still are working on the drafts of this. It's going to start, I believe, in 5 major airports, which I believe are Schiphol, Brussels, I think it was Rome, Madrid, and London, I think. So, another one to keep watch on, because this is going to be interesting as well. This is a test. They basically say they're just doing an example now to see what the reaction is from the public. So, if any of you get into the European Union and they want to do these things, at this point, you're going to be able to decline. And I suggest that everyone decline really, really loudly, because this is a test. And, you know, I promised I was going to talk about Greece. But then this one came up and I was like, oh, okay, we're going to have to talk about this just a little tiny bit. The Greek minister threatens Europe with flood of jihadist immigrants if Greece fails. Now, this is Zero Hedge. It wasn't even a full 24 hours after Greece raided at least some of the funds of its pensions and other public entities in order to make the first 310 million euro payment to the IMF. And they've got like 3 more for the rest of this month. By the end of this month, they've got 3 more payments of equal value almost. It says this time it was foreign minister and leader of the Independent Greeks Party, Syriza's junior coalition partner, who showed how to bluff. He knows how to bluff like the rest of them when he threatened there will be tens of millions of immigrants and thousands of jihadists if you take out Greece. In other words, now that Syriza government, having run out of money as well as all the leverage and bargaining power, because clearly they're not going to follow through on exiting the euro. They bluffed. They lost the bluff. Doesn't matter what they say. they've handed all of the cards back to the Troika. Now that the ECB has gained all leverage over Transpicuous, it can proceed with dispensing the verbal slaps in the face. So on Monday, there's a meeting to decide when the IMF, ECB, and European Commission representatives are going to go to Athens, whose role would be to determine the government's liquidity, because nobody in Europe currently has any idea of just how much or how little cash Greece has left. So instead of Troika, it's now institutions. Instead of liquidity, it's now cash flow. And instead of third bailout, it's now contract for recovery and growth of the Greek economy. And Greek people just got screwed. So if you're in Greece, you may want to express your unhappiness, we'll say, with the entire soap opera that the government has put the Greek people through. Just saying. Now, this is interesting. We got a few things coming up here with the gold issues. This one of those right away, I listen for the articles that kind of ping me, if you will, and go, oh, wait a second. Bangladesh seizes gold from North Korean diplomat. Customs officials in Bangladesh have seized gold worth around $1.7 million from the hand luggage of a North Korean diplomat. This guy was the first secretary at the North Korean embassy in Dhaka. He landed on a flight from Singapore on Thursday night. They found 27 kilograms of gold bars after much back and forth about, diplomatic immunity, blah, 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 blah. Now, the comment, the spin to the article is very, very funny. Mr. Khan added, "It's a clear case of smuggling. We believe he would have sold the gold to a local criminal racket. He is being used as a carrier." Well, Mr. Khan, I disagree. And the reason I disagree is because the European Union and the US has just put new sanctions on North Korea. And part of those new sanctions are, and I quote, "There are new prohibitions on the sale, export, or purchase of gold, precious metals, and diamonds to or for North Korea." So if they've been sanctioned that no one's allowed to sell them gold, got to get the gold in the country a different way. Now, as a little side note, some of you might find this interesting. We know that China's the #1 gold producer of the world by a huge amount. We know that China doesn't export its gold. They keep it all for themselves. Now, the one thing that has been commented on for a long, long time is a lot of gold from China seems to find its way to India, through back alley deals. So it's termed. And it comes in down through Nepal and into India. And there's a lot of gold smuggling that way. So I find it kind of interesting that North Korea has got sanctions against it from buying gold. And yet, because of the new financial global system changes that are coming in, they obviously need gold. So I wonder if, hypothetically, China's using a new trade route, kind of like plausible deniability, right? If the gold gets smuggled out of China down to India and a North Korean diplomat happens to get a hold of it and then fly it into North Korea, it's not China's fault that they got this gold. I'm just saying, I have no information on this, but hypothetically speaking, it kind of could happen that way. And speaking of gold in China, the new London gold fix starts this month. I will also add to this, the new so hold on, we'll backtrack here. The new physical gold market will undergo radical change when the 4 London fixing banks hand over the twice daily fix to the international commodity exchange trading platform on the 20th of March. 20th of March, it's the 8th. They have 12 days. They still have released no information on this. There has been almost nothing released on how the price of gold is going to be set. Nothing. Not even who's going to be involved, really. Now, of course, this article here goes into the fact that they think that China, major Chinese state-owned banks, assuming they register as direct participants, pardon me, have the opportunity to dominate the London physical market without having to deal through one of the current fixing banks. And I'm sorry, I still get such a giggle when they call it a fixing bank. I mean, we all know what a fix is, right? Sorry, it's transparency right there. And I'm going to tell you right now, China will be hugely involved in this. The little testing pieces have been running out on this. China is going to be hugely involved. I also suspect that even on March 20th, when this goes live, we're not going to have a lot of information. And I think it's going to require a few weeks, if not a few months, of background digging before we get a real clear picture of how the new international commodity exchange trading platform is actually going to run. Oh, yes. This is a prime example of the ridiculousness of what happens when an article is pushed out to become viral. And that's the only way I can call this, because this article was ridiculous. And the fact that it was covered by everyone, and not just, minor bloggers. I'm talking, this article got serious traction in a lot of the heavy-hitting alternative media. First China, then Russia. Now Apple is out to hoover up gold, is going to buy 30% of the world's gold output, putting gold vaults in the Apple stores. Oh my God! Everybody freak out! Really? Seriously? Okay, let's just stand back a second and analyze this article. Okay, so Apple's coming out with a new smartwatch. The average price of these watches is going to be about $350 each. Now, they're also going to come up with a special edition smartwatch, which is going to be 18 karat gold. Okay, so then we had this article come out, and it, like I said, went viral. And watch out, China, Apple to buy 30% of the world's gold, putting gold vaults in the Apple stores. Oh my goodness. So basically some guy from Apple News Forum Tidbits, and this has got to be a plant, okay, begins with the assumption that each Apple Watch edition contains 2 troy ounces of gold. So he says, and I quote, if Apple makes 1 million Apple Watch editions every month, that equals to 24 million troy ounces of gold per year, or roughly 746 metric tons, which would equate to approximately 1/3 of the global annual output of gold. Now, shall we discuss the ridiculousness? Okay, so for those of you who don't understand precious metals, a troy ounce is not an ounce. A troy ounce is a measure used specifically when dealing with precious metals. 1 troy ounce equals 31.1 grams. So 2 troy ounces equals 62.2 grams. Now, I have lots of watchers in the States, so I'm going to give you, let's go to visual learning aids, okay? This little container of yogurt, okay, so look, there we are, look at the size of my head, size of my hand, contains approximately 100 grams of yogurt. So if you were to take your little yogurt cup, which is the average size they are everywhere, eat a little over 1/3 of it, and then hold it in your hand and weigh it. And that's how much gold they say is going to be in this gold watch. 62.2 grams, which is asinine. I've seen people lift those little weight things, with less weight on them than that. Are you kidding me? Okay, but sorry, we'll break it down a little farther, right? We went through, and I actually went and dug in a bunch of different articles about it. So they predicted that Apple will sell 20 million units of its smartwatches, doubling the Forrester analysts of 10 million a year. Okay, 20 million of the smartwatches, not the solid gold smartwatches, just 10 million, 20 million of the smartwatches. Now, they're talking that these gold watches are going to be $10,000 a pop. And this guy writing this article thinks that Apple's going to sell 1 million of them a month at $10,000 a pop. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, not bloody likely. Now, the other notice here is it's encased in 18 karat gold. Encased in, remember, it's a computer watch. It means that it's going to have to house a hell of a lot of little electronic bits and pieces. So just the casing is going to be 18 karat gold. This is a prime example of someone being paid to put out absolute bullshit to feed a market. And more than that, to distract. Because this was just a huge distraction. And I literally had people talking about this for about 36 hours after this article came out. Oh, as far as putting vaults in their stores, they're now carrying jewelry. Every jewelry store on the planet has a little tiny vault where they put the expensive jewelry. Yeah, if you could call it a gold vault since they're going to put gold watches in it. It's not a gold vault. Seriously. So anyways, yeah, this story annoyed the hell out of me just because so many people took it at face value. It was like, oh God, people, please don't do this to me. Okay. But further on gold, very interesting legislation coming out in the States. Arizona State passed a bill to make gold and silver legal tender. What's interesting though, this was a mainstream media article. This wasn't just, this bill being covered by an alternative media. This is right out of the newspaper. Arizona State representative who introduced the bill said the problem with a system based solely on Federal Reserve notes is that it is subject to inflation, so buying power of each dollar decreases over time. When we have a fiat currency that is continually bouncing up and down relative to the price of oil and other market conditions, we are at risk. The interesting part is, if this law passes, gold and silver purchases would be protected from state capital gains taxation. Very interesting. According to the 10th Amendment Center, once things get to that point, Federal Reserve notes would become largely unwanted and irrelevant for the ordinary people. Now, my little side note, the original article, the passing of this bill, happened February 4th, yet it took an entire month to get out to the public. And when it did, it went viral. Timing. Why was it a full month before it kind of was pushed out there? Interesting questions, interesting timing too. Talking about new bills, Texas of all places, shock of all shocks, Austin, Texas, in a bold piece of legislation, Republican David Simpson filed a bill that would delete any mention of marijuana from state law. It would completely deregulate it and treat it as any other common crop, just like tomatoes, jalapenos, or coffee. Sorry guys, I've got popcorn husk stuck in my throat. It's not doing so well at the moment. Okay, so Texas. Interesting stuff been coming out about the states this week. All kinds of little interesting bits and pieces. So the CIA director, Brennan, orders a major overhaul to the CIA. Now, I read about 7 or 8 different articles on this. Some of the wording got very, very interesting. He's ordered one of the largest reorganizations of the spy agency in its history. Mr. Brennan told reporters that the cell-like nature of the agency often meant that there's no one person he could hold accountable for a spying mission. Isn't that interesting? There are a lot of areas that I would like to have better insight to, better information about, and better access to. I think we need to keep a close eye on what the CIA is doing. They especially go into a whole lot of stuff in these articles about cybersecurity. Are they about to, jump on the wagon with the NSA and the FBI and make an open thing where they want you to be able to access all your computers, etc.? We'll have to wait and see, but this is going to be one to keep a close eye on. And then you have this. This is Tyler over at Zero Hedge has been going on about this for months now, which is the subprime auto market loans. So back 2007, 2008, of course, it was the subprime house loans. And now it is the auto loans. Well, Goldman Sachs finally confirms that subprime is responsible for the collapse in auto sales. This is really, really funny, though. Our fears were confirmed last week when the surest sign yet that the subprime auto bubble has reached its peak. CNBC unveiled what we have dubbed the car stock arbitrage, where viewers are advised by CNBC to take out an 84-month car loan and put all that money in the stock market. I shit you not. I saw the article myself and my jaw dropped. It was like, it's kind of like, oh, wait a second. Wasn't it CNN who just 2 months ago told all those students that instead of paying off their student loan, they should take that money and just go play it in the stock market? Gee, I wonder what's going on that they're trying to get everyone into the stock market. What is also very funny is it talks about the car sales dropped radically in February, that even AutoNation CEO Mike Jackson's truck sale couldn't pull them out of the mire. And of course, the media decided that the reason that car sales fell was because it was due to the weather. It was all that snow in the winter, and just people weren't buying trucks. I love how the media blames everything on the weather. Everything on the weather. Stock market fell. Oh, it was a snowstorm. Oh, car sales fell. Oh, it was a home forest. Oh, snowstorm. Oh, yes. It's all about the weather. Now, here's the big one. How many of you remembered this? Because I actually forgot this myself. Guess what, folks? The debt ceiling gets reached March 16th in the United States. Jack Lew says to Congress, the U.S. hits the debt ceiling on March 16th and it needs to be raised immediately. Unless Congress takes action, the U.S. will hit its debt ceiling limit on March 16th and would begin taking extraordinary measures to finance the government on temporary basis. Now, here's the best line in all of this. The Treasury Secretary emphasized that the increasing the debt limit does not authorize new spending commitments, but rather simply allows the government to pay for the expenditures that the Congress has already approved. So basically, it just allows them to pay all the CODs and all the shit that Congress has already ordered. These guys really need some help with balancing their checkbook. Is there an accountant in the house? Because really, this boggles my mind daily. And going on with boggling of the mind, I love when people pull out the math and go, oh, gee, CNN, your math doesn't really add up. I seem to have a problem making these numbers work that you've given us. According to the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics released, the unemployment rate fell to 5.5 as of February. The last time the unemployment rate was this low was May 2008. 2008, keep that in mind. Think about that. What I'm fascinated by is the fact that the U.S. population grew from February 2008 to February 2015 by 16.8 million people, or a 5.5% increase in total population. And on a net basis, not a single one of those 16.8 million people got a full-time job. While a net 2.7 million were lucky enough to get a multiple or single part-time job. That means that 14.3 million people, or 4.4% of the current US population, were added without a single job among them. This makes for fascinating math when 4.4% increase to the total US population without jobs can nearly half the unemployment rate down to 5.5%, which is equal to 2008. That, my friends, is what we call very, very creative accounting. And like I said, distractions galore. Ag-gag, law criminalizing documentation of farming abuses is passed in Wyoming. Wyoming Governor Matt Mead has signed into law legislation designed to crack down on whistleblowers and journalists or trespassers who attempt to document without permission food safety or animal welfare violations on private property. There you go. No more spying on the cows. And just to keep this ball rolling, the Republicans have launched an Internet Freedom Act that would wipe out net neutrality. Now, it all sounds really, really nice, but there are holes in this Internet Freedom Act that I could drive a Mack truck through. So we're definitely going to keep an eye on this as well, because it could be very interesting. And they were so desperate for distraction this week that they actually had to pull up the JonBenet Ramsey case again. The child died almost 20 years ago. And yet they pushed this all over the place for about a week. New information comes forward. Distract, distract, distract. And if you've been watching CNN, there has been like no news this week other than make-believe news. Like some NFL guy twisted his shoulder and some other guy, slipped and fell and spilled his coffee and then sued the store because he slipped and fell, spilled his coffee. Literally, that's kind of what the news was this week. Wonder what they're trying to hide. Well, guess what? Remember last month? There was the freight train loaded with crude oil that derailed in Virginia, followed immediately by the one in Canada. Well, look, 103-car freight train loaded with crude oil derails in Illinois. Now, the interesting thing is, I go a little digging. Tyler pulls all this up. Warren Buffett owned freight train derails and bursts into flame. Huh. Really? He's talking about the fact of all of a sudden this spike in the amount of oil that's being moved by freight train is massive. Like since 2010, 2012, boom. Wow, isn't it interesting? They're not producing that much more oil. They've just decided to move it by freight train. And they just keep crashing these trains all over the place. It's very interesting that Warren Buffett purchased Burlington Northern Santa Fe in 2009, and Obama, as they say, has been so staunchly against allowing the Keystone Pipeline. Because if there's no pipeline, you got to move the oil somehow. So therefore, it gets moved by train. But they keep, crashing the trains, which is also very interesting when you think about, we discussed this last week, how the articles were coming out that they were trying to push up the price of oil by attacking all the oil lines in Iraq, in Libya, in Yemen. Okay, so we don't have the oil lines, but all of a sudden we have oil freight trains blowing up everywhere. Did you know that oil freight trains are really heavily insured? Like, really heavily insured? You think that's good? We're going to look at that's a little peek at the whole Keystone pipeline. So in 2012, Obama rejects the application. And then there's a new route is going to be approved by the Nebraska governor on January 2013. April 2014, Obama administration announced the review of the Keystone oil pipeline had been extended indefinitely. On January 9th, 2015, the Nebraska Supreme Court cleared a way for construction. And on the very same day, the House voted in favor of the pipeline. And as of January 29th, the Keystone Pipeline has been passed by the Senate. As of February 11th, it was passed by the House of Representatives. On February 24th, the bill was vetoed and returned for congressional action. On March 4th, the Senate held a vote and failed to override President Obama's veto of the bill. So, it seems to me you get a twofold benefit out of this, right? You crash the oil trains, you get all that insurance money on them, you get to make a big deal about the price of oil, and, we help keep moving the oil without using pipelines, which are terrible anyway, but still. But more fun, right after that one, there's another one in Canada. There have been 4 major oil train derailments in Canada, in northern Ontario, since the beginning of 2015. And someone tell me this is not fishy. Someone tell me, really, with a straight face, that this is not being perpetrated on purpose. There's no bloody way that you can have all these oil train derailments. And not just, we're talking exploding, the whole bit. Not buying it. So here's something that was very interesting yesterday. Like I said, sometimes stories hit me, and when they scratch my itchy bump, as I always say. And something goes, oh, there's something to this. And then I go digging. So yesterday, the White House was put on lockdown. And there was something about the way it was worded in the first article I read that made me go, oh, what are they covering up here? There's definitely a piece missing in this. So I went through several, at least 10 articles on covering this, just to see what they were saying. A security lockdown at the White House was triggered by a loud bang as President Barack Obama was due to leave. It was caused by a souvenir truck catching fire in a nearby street, the Secret Service said on Saturday. The security alert happened just moments before Obama and his family were due to leave by helicopter. A vehicle near the White House was investigated and cleared after a bomb-sniffing dog detected something on it. The souvenir truck, which belonged to a Korean family from Virginia who do not speak English, was completely destroyed by the fire. Now, first of all, they can't get it straight whether it's a souvenir truck or it's a food truck, because all the articles, all over the place. So USA Today says the White House security officers scrambled Saturday to investigate apparent suspicious vehicle and a fire at a nearby vendor cart, prompting a lockdown on the mansion grounds. A sniffer dog had alerted on a vehicle at the 1600 block of Constitution Avenue, and a lockdown was put into effect at about the same time a vendor cart caught fire at 15th and G Street. Then you have the Journal. This is the Irish Journal. Okay, talks about, they go through it. As Poole and other press gathered outside near the South Lawn for the departure of President Obama, there was a loud noise was heard. The Secret Service then moved the press back into the briefing room and locked the doors. Subsequent Poole reports said the presidential motorcade left the White House at 11:36. Yahoo News. The source of the noise was unclear. A Secret Service canine unit was investigating a vehicle at 16th and Constitution, and Washington, D.C. Fire Department, meanwhile, reported a fire at a food cart at 15th Avenue Northwest. The Secret Service then moved the press back into the briefing room and locked the doors. Now, the interesting part was I stumbled across an article by a guy in alternative media who's in Washington, D.C. And one of the things he says is some excitement this morning after an explosion was heard and smoke rose over an area a block south of the White House. Secret Service ordered a lockdown. Turned out to be a burning vendor's cart parked at the curb at 15th Northwest between Pennsylvania and Constitution on the east side, not 15th NG Northwest, as all the media reported. At the same time, a bomb dog was alerted on a different vehicle on the corner of Constitution Avenue. Now, being me, because I can't help myself, I decided to go and map all this. So, where's my mouse? There's my mouse. So, there's our White House here. This, on Constitution Avenue, is where the canine sniffed the car and the canine bomb squad sniffed something that interested him about this car. The vendor food truck fire happens right here, yet the media reports that it happened over here. Now that's, let's see, 4 blocks away from where it actually happened. These are the kind of things that make me say, it could just be that the media just made a clusterfuck mess of reporting on this. Or does it mean something else? Now, all the Western media made a big deal of saying, oh, well, you know, the White House goes into lockdown quite often. Any little thing that kind of sets them off, they lock down the White House. Okay, if it happens this often, then why was this news story carried as far away as the India Times, the Irish Journal, the London Guardian? This was carried all over the world, and yet it was such a little thing. It was so unimportant. So yeah, my itchy bump is itching on this one. And when we consider the other stuff that we know that's going on all around Washington, D.C., like smoke in subways and various other reports that I've had, you have to wonder about these things. So my eyes are always peeled. Now we're going to move overseas. This is interesting, folks. So General Breedlove, and I just love his name because the last thing he breeds is love, really. This article was in Der Spiegel in Germany. Apparently, the Europeans are really getting freaked out. Okay, Breedlove's bellicosity. Berlin alarmed by the aggressive NATO stance on the Ukraine. Okay, the article goes on to say, it was quiet in eastern Ukraine last Wednesday. It was indeed another quiet day in an extended stretch of relative calm. The battles between the Ukrainian army and the pro-Russian separatists had largely stopped. Heavy weaponry was being withdrawn, and the Minsk ceasefire wasn't holding perfectly, but it was holding. On the very same day, General Philip Breedlove, the top NATO commander in Europe, comes out and says, right now, it's not getting any better. It's getting worse every single day, and makes up all this stuff about well over 1,000 combat vehicles and Russian combat forces and some of their most sophisticated air defense and battalions of artillery. And basically, a lot of the European leaders, especially Germany and France are mentioned, were like, what the fuck? They didn't understand what Breedlove was talking about, and it wasn't the first time. Once again, the German government, supported by intelligence gathered, I'm not even going to try and say to the name of their security agency, did not share the view of NATO's supreme allied commander in Europe. The pattern has become a familiar one, though. Over and over again, Breedlove's numbers have been significantly higher than those in the possession of the NATO allies in Europe. The German government is alarmed. Are the Americans trying to thwart European efforts at mediation led by Chancellor Angela Merkel? Sources in the Chancellery have referred to Breedlove's comments as dangerous propaganda. This is some interesting stuff going on right now. And everything in the Ukraine, a lot of the stuff coming out of the Ukraine is very, very hushed at the moment. Now, another article came out of Russia, this one saying that NATO seeks regime change in Russia, and basically are talking about the fact that the deputy head of NATO is testifying that the leaders of the bloc want to intervene in Russia's internal politics and are dreaming of a Russian maiden. Oh, it's going to be interesting to see how that fares out. But considering the kind of crap that Breedlove's been doing, I'm more inclined to believe the Russian story than I am inclined to believe the US media story on this one. Now, Nemtsov, the Russian politician who was murdered right in front of the Kremlin. I just want to ask everyone's opinion. This is a picture of the woman he was with when he was murdered, the only apparent witness to the murder. Anna is a 23-year-old Ukrainian supermodel. She was with Boris Nemtsov, 55, when he was gunned down in Moscow. She's now back in the Ukraine. And she's under protective custody, apparently, because she's received death threats. But she's in the Ukraine receiving protective custody from the Ukraine government, even though she's the only one who witnessed a murder that happened right in front of the Kremlin of basically the opposition leader for the government. Does anyone else find that a little fishy? Because I immediately was like, yeah, that just seems an awful lot convenient. But I'm just a conspiracy theorist, so what do I know anyway? Now this is, sorry for the picture, guys. Unfortunately, it was everywhere. In the Ukraine, just outside of Donetsk, there is a majorly huge coal mine, Zasyadko coal mine. And there was a really, really bad explosion this week. I believe the total is now there was 34 men killed. It's a real disaster. It's a real mess. I mean, it's in an area where, because of all the fighting, that it's already in a very, very, shall we say, fragile state. And then to have this happen. Now, what's really interesting about this, okay, if you read about this mine has got one of the worst safety records in the world. Okay, it is the most dangerous coal mines in the world because of due to naturally high levels of methane and coal dust explosion hazards. Very, very deep coal mine, this one. I believe the deepest shaft is, I think it was 2,700 meters deep. This is a really majorly deep coal mine. Now I want you to look at the accidents that have happened in this coal mine. This is, in 2007, they had 3 major explosions in this mine. Now, this is one of those times when I decide exactly how much I can say. I got some information about 3 weeks ago that I'm still tracking down and I'm still trying to verify. Unfortunately, it's that kind of information that getting any real facts is excruciatingly difficult because I can't really talk openly about the information that I'm trying to find. So what I'm going to say is, what I learned is there's a very, very different reason as to why there is a battle going on over this piece of the Ukraine. And it has to do with what's underneath these coal mines. there's a reason why this mine is still open. There's a battle going on to control the mineral that is being mined underneath this mine. It's a battle between governments who want to control it. And given the information I've been coming up with, I'm kind of been able to backtrack this mineral to the military coup in Mali, Zimbabwe, and the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa. All, I strongly suspect, due to trying to control this mineral. I strongly suspect that some of the things that we're seeing happen is due to this. Certain things that I know were moved into the United States, I don't believe were what they were labeled to be. And I don't believe that the areas they were sent to are the areas they were really sent to. And I think that's the reason why you saw the CIA lockdown in Virginia. I'm tracking this down. I have someone I'm trying to get a hold of right now, which is very difficult to get a hold of. I am trying. But yeah, the whole thing in the Ukraine has, the stories they're spinning really has nothing to do with it. It is a power struggle over what is the equivalent of power and money. And that's all I'm going to say on this topic for right now, because I can't really get into any more details until I have more background information. But yeah, there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. And now we're going to get into even more strange stuff, exciting stuff though, and that's the Middle East. There's some serious shit going on in Iraq, serious shit. And as much as it can be very confusing to a lot of people, I am so excited by the news coming out of Iraq right now. So we're going to start. First off, little side note before we get into all of this. Saudi Arabia just officially dethroned India as the world's biggest weapons importer. Saudi Arabia has passed India to become the world's biggest arms importer last year as concerns about Iran's ambitions increased tensions in the Middle East. Saudi's spending rose 54% last year. And who do you think they buy most of their stuff from? Give you 3 guesses. I think you're only going to need 1. And we're going to jump over to Israel for a second. So apparently, and I've seen numbers as anywhere between 45 and 65,000 people gathered in Tel Aviv to as a demonstration against Netanyahu. And one of the keynote speakers was the former Mossad chief, who basically claimed that Benjamin Netanyahu has served as prime minister for 6 years straight. 6 years in which he has not led a single genuine process of change to the face of the region or creation of a better future. On his watch, Israel conducted the longest military campaign since the War of Independence. It was a huge, like the picture, a huge demonstration. And basically, the way it looks now is basically there are more Republicans in the States who love Netanyahu than there are in Israel. So than there are Israelis, so who love him. So that's got to say a whole hell of a lot. This is interesting though. This came out today. Sorry. It was on Press TV, and I didn't see this on March 5th. And Global Research published this yesterday. Press TV obtained photos showing Al-Qaeda-linked militants next to Israeli soldiers in the occupied Golan Heights. Just standing there, hanging around, shooting the shit. Kind of an interesting photo op, I think. And it kind of ties in nicely with what we're going to talk about now. So you remember last week, or over the last couple of weeks, first we have Iraq Air Force or Iraq Army shoots down 2 British airplanes delivering weapons to ISIS. Then they shoot down an American airplane and an American helicopter delivering weapons and food and medical supplies to ISIS. And guess what? This week has been a very busy week for the military in Iraq, as they basically have stormed Tikrit and have been in a huge push to take Tikrit back from the ISIS terrorists. And in storming and taking it back, they arrested 4 military advisors to ISIS. 2 Americans, 1 Mossad agent, and 1 from the Persian Gulf Cooperation Council member state. Now, they don't tell you in any of the articles, and I read every article I could find on this, what member state it was. Okay? But the Cooperation Council for the Arab states of the Gulf, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So basically, the Iraqi military yesterday arrested 2 Americans, an Israeli Mossad agent, and someone from the Cooperation Council for the Arab States of the Gulf, who were there as military advisors to ISIS. They have their passports even. This is all over the Middle East news. This is everywhere. This is literally, except, of course, nowhere near the Western media, because they would never report on any of this. Very interesting that all of a sudden, stronger and stronger actions and words coming out from the Iraqis against the Americans and against the CIA-run ops with ISIS. Now, this was actually funny. This is Jim Stone. I love some of his stuff. It's quite funny. He says, 3 days ago, Iran entered Iraq with 60 armored vehicles to fight ISIS after being invited to by the Iraqi government. Now, 4 top ISIS foreign military advisors have been busted. No reference to Iran actually doing the bust was given, but it's all pretty obvious. If the leadership of ISIS was busted and they were American, Mossad, Israel is destroying ancient artifacts and blaming it on the Muslims. And they have now, with the latest raid on antiquities, destroyed them with their favorite tool, the bulldozer. Okay? Now, a little side note here. Apparently, Iraq didn't invite the U.S. to come and play in this war game. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say that given the wording of a couple of the articles, Iraq told the U.S. to stay the fuck out. No U.S. strikes and Iran-backed bid to retake Tikrit. Iraq forces and militias are continuing their largest offensive to date against the so-called Islamic State as they seek to retake the city of Tikrit. Iranian advisors and Iranian-backed Shiite militias are playing a key role in the campaign for the Sunni city. I want people to take note of that. That is really, really important. With reports of Iranian troops even operating artillery in the area, U.S. officials, meanwhile, have expressed surprise over the Tikrit operation, and the Pentagon has said it is not providing air support because they weren't asked. like I said, I'm gonna strongly suggest that perhaps they were told to keep their fucking noses out of it. They were uninvited to play. Was the whole thing with Mosul a setup? There's something there. Why did the U.S. Pentagon come out and announce to everyone that in April, Iraq military was going to come in and wipe out all of the terrorists in Mosul? And then all of a sudden this happens. Like as I covered, immediately in Mosul, you had the ISIS terrorists destroyed the museum and totally decimated a whole lot of stuff. Well, that was only the beginning. Oh, I guess I got ahead of myself. We'll get back to that little point in a second. Big articles coming out, of course, is that ISIS generates up to $1 billion annually from trafficking Afghan heroin. Isn't that interesting? There's another agency that I know of who makes a lot of its money to support its black ops through selling heroin. That's the CIA. Oh, and the fact that it's Afghan heroin, that's why the CIA was in Afghan to begin with, was so that they could control all the opium in the poppy fields. Isn't that special? I love when they just come out and give you like really big pieces of the puzzle. So, as I started to say, last week, and this literally, I've been researching a certain aspect to a lot of stuff going on for about 3 weeks. Stuff that's been going on in Iraq and Syria, in those regions. And then I saw this article come out, and I was like, holy shit. This was confirmation to me. Nimrud, which is a city in the south of Iraq, is one of the most ancient cities on this planet. Nimrud was around before the pyramids. It is an archaeological site of such immense value in human history as to boggle the mind. Well, apparently, ISIS went in with bulldozers and bulldozed the entire city. They assaulted the historic city of Nimrud and bulldozed it with heavy vehicles, the Tourism and Antiquities Ministry said on Thursday. A local tribal source told Reuters Islamic State members came to the Nimrud archaeological city, looted the valuables in it, and then they proceeded to level the site to the ground. There used to be statues and walls as well as a castle. The Islamic State has destroyed it completely. So, they have destroyed the city of Nimrud. This is, like I said, one of the most historically relevant places on the planet. This is the cradle of civilization, where we're talking about the Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians. This is the very cradle of civilization as we know it. And it was completely bulldozed. Now, there's a lot of stuff about Nimrud, which is very, very interesting. One of the pieces about Nimrud is it is also, that area is the home to the Assyrians, the Assyrian people, who I talked about last week on Wednesday, and we talked about what has been done to the Assyrian people. Now, this is history repeating itself. We've had several articles come out in the last 2 months talking about ISIS selling antiquities, and that's how they're funding a lot of their work, is that they're selling antiques and these archaeological finds, and they're selling them. Now, I was not so heavily engrossed in what was going on during the Second Gulf War at that time point in 2003, etc. I was very, very heavily focused in a different area. Well, I went looking, and we're seeing a complete freaking repeat of what happened in 2003. Now, as a little reminder, America was slammed by several agencies, such as heritage type agencies and antiquities agencies, for looting Iraq's antiques and the antiquities and the archaeological finds when they went in 2003. A wave of protest, this article is from 2003, a wave of protest has also come from the Archaeological Institute of America, which says any weakening of Iraq's strict antiquities laws would be disastrous. The ACCP's agenda, which is the agency who's campaigning to change these laws, is to encourage collecting of antiquities through national ownership of antiquities to allow for easier export. Basically, in 2003, when the US went in, they robbed Iraq blind. And it wasn't just the oil, it wasn't just the gold that they had in the vaults and the dinar they had in the vaults. One of the things that they did is they went in and they destroyed the museum in Baghdad. And it was completely pillaged. Like completely pillaged. And they did the same thing in the museum in Mosul. And in several other places all over Iraq. Now, back in, let's see, this was a really interesting series of articles. And again, as usual, I'll have the links down below. Raiders of the Lost Iraq, again, 2003, they're talking about all this stuff. So, for example, one of the things that happened is they discovered the treasures of Nineveh were found in early 2003, hidden in a bank vault, deeply hidden in a bank vault. And these treasures are, you can look at them, you can go and actually do a Google image search to see pictures of them. Some of the stuff, like the crowns, etc., were unbelievable. I mean, these true treasures. And so there was this big deal that they were going to be put on display, and they were put on display for the world to see. These were ancient treasures, Assyrian treasures. Now, the interesting thing is as you go looking, you have the whole thing with the US, you have all the museums get ransacked. I had my entire research team trying to find any mention of where the treasure is now, and there is not a single mention of it after 2003. You cannot find, I literally searched, I had friends of mine search and search and search. You can find all sorts of articles about it being hidden, about it being discovered, about it being put on display in the museum, and then it's gone. There is no information. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is what's going on with the Assyrians. Brick by brick, person by person, ISIS is erasing Assyrians from their homeland. The Assyrians have been destroyed. And like I said, if you go and actually read, you can just go to the Wikipedia page and look up Assyria. You read the history of the Assyrian people, they have been genocidally persecuted for millennia. It's almost as if once they fell from the height of civilization, that basically everyone's been out to get them. Now, there's some interesting things about Assyria and about Assyrians. So this here, or this one here, this is just a list of the various attacks on Assyrians and that has happened by ISIS and other Muslim groups in the last, 3 years? And some of the attacks that have happened in 3 years. When you look into the history of the Assyrians, they have a very interesting history. The vast majority of Assyrians are Christian, and they have a very specific belief structure, if you will. One of the little known facts that most people don't realize is they are the last people on the planet who in daily life speak Aramaic. Well, the reason this is important is because although most Christian religions don't talk about it, Christ didn't speak Hebrew. He didn't speak Greek. He didn't speak Latin. Christ and the apostles, Jesus Christ and the apostles, spoke Aramaic. That was their native tongue. Now, if we hypothesize, just bear with me. We have people who still speak and are the only people on the planet, this very tiny population now, who still speak the language that the original Gospels were written in. Who are a very devout sect of Christianity, but follow a very specific set of beliefs. And especially since the beginning of the 1900s, they have been systematically, genocidally hunted down and killed by regime after regime after regime. And I'm talking the Ottoman Empire. I think the Russians went after them for a while, the Iranians, the Saudi Arabians, everyone. And they haven't had a homeland, an official homeland of their own in hundreds of years. One of the things that was promised to them after the Second World War was that they would be given back their heritage homelands. And they never have been. And basically, they've been chased all over the Middle East, from one place to another. And again, now a lot of the Assyrians are now escaping into Turkey, back again, where 100 years ago they were fleeing out of Turkey. Now, there have been a lot of stories about secret societies. And there's been a lot of fictional works that have been written and movies that have talked about secret societies and keepers of the secrets. Now I have to wonder, and it was one of the first things that really struck me as I was researching this, is there a knowledge that these people have? And that's why they're being hunted down and literally wiped out off the face of the planet? Is there something they know? And that is why they're being genocidally wiped out? Their homelands are the birthplace of civilization, if you want to follow any of the religious orders of modern times, be it Judaic, Christian, Muslim. The Assyrian nation is the birthland of civilization, the birth of civilization. Now, I'm also going to get into a little bit of the woo-woo stuff. So any of you who just want to listen to news, you may want to turn this off now because this is going to get kind of woo-woo. We know for a fact that one of the other reasons that America invaded that area twice, the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, wasn't just about gold and antiquities and not just about oil, etc. It has been long rumored that there were very important artifacts that were hidden in these areas. Now, some people talk about stargates. There was A lot of hints about that even came out in the TV show Stargate. They talked about a lot of things that made a whole lot of people who actually were historically knowledgeable go, oh, that's interesting. They would talk about that. There was a lot of things transported out of Iraq, especially when the Shrub Jr. went in. When you see this destruction that's going on right now by ISIS, i.e. the CIA and the Americans, leveling an ancient town, an ancient city, an ancient civilization archaeological dig with bulldozers. First of all, I'd like to know where the hell they got the frickin' bulldozers to begin with. The deliberate destruction of archaeological finds of vast importance. Basically, they either smashed them or they shipped them out of the country and sold them or kept them. They've been going to site after site after site, ISIS has. Several remote Christian monasteries have been razed to the ground, destroyed. What are they looking for? Because this strikes me as not just a matter of we're going to just get some pretty necklaces and a couple of these vases and hawk them in the back on the black market. And it goes beyond that. I'm being very sarcastic. I mean, there's a massive market for these kind of items in Europe, especially. It goes beyond that. This isn't just about making money, because what we are seeing right now over the last 2 months, to me, is a very distinct look at someone who's looking for something and ensuring that whatever it is, if they can't move it, they're going to destroy it. What is it? I have no idea. I strongly suspect there's a lot more involved here than, like I said, just making some money from moving antiquities or the gold or the oil. Now, my last little word I want to say on this for tonight. The news coming out of Iraq right now is extremely exciting. And I know a lot of people in the whole dinar world are very, very confused right now with some of these reports that are coming out. And if you are on the side of the fence that believes that the United States is actually working towards the global currency revaluation and actually is moving forward with it, then I can understand why you're confused. In my opinion, give you only my opinion, I've been saying for a long time, the United States is not moving forward with the RV. They're still doing everything they can to stop it. Hence, the stuff going on in Iraq, the ISIS stuff, the Ukraine, Israel, hell, even Venezuela. The massive distractions they're playing out because they don't want it to go through, because it is the end, the absolute end of their stranglehold on the global financial systems. In which case, what you're seeing right now is the Iraqi government standing up and saying, I don't fucking think so. We're done playing your bullshit games. We're not playing your bullshit games anymore. It has become very, very clear in the last month that the Iraq military, at the very least, is not playing the Americans' games anymore. And this little move in the last week in Tikrit is a huge indicator. The public announcements by Iraqi military that they are shooting down American planes who are dropping supplies to ISIS. This is the biggest news we have ever had, because you have a way better chance of seeing the Iraqi dinar revalue with the Iraqis in charge than you ever have with the Americans being in charge, because the Americans will never let it happen, and they will do everything they can to stop it. And I don't care whose intel says differently. I've been watching this. There is no way the Americans are working towards this. But Iraq is standing up now. And Iraq does have the power to revalue their currency. And right now, America is isolating themselves from everyone. Germany's pissed off at them. France is pissed off at them. Russia's always been pissed off at them. Iraq is going to have a lot of support. A lot of support internationally. And all it's going to take is for Iraq to get to that point. And there was some rumors early this week, around Monday, that what they were doing in Tikrit was actually a huge important thing towards the revaluing of the currency. So we're going to watch and see. But I personally am seriously fucking excited, because Iraq standing up and taking the stance they are with, working with Iran. You people, if you don't understand this, this is a huge step forward. So, take heart. And that was my very, very long-winded Sunday night report for Transpicuous News. I will be back Wednesday night at 11 p.m. GMT, and I have no idea what time that is in North America now, because you guys just did the daylight savings time and I'm totally screwed up. So you guys work it out for yourselves. 11 p.m. GMT, Wednesday night. I'll see you there. Bye, everyone.
Transpicuous News, connecting the dots between the lines.